The late afternoon sun hung low over Rosedale County Fairgrounds, bathing the oval track in swaths of honeyed light and lengthening shadows across the bleachers. Festival tents fluttered in a gentle breeze, their canvas tops striped red and white, while the distant echo of carnival music, calliope notes and laughter, drifted through the fragrant haze of funnel cake sugar and fresh-cut hay. A solitary scoreboard perched at the finish line, its blank panels awaiting the day's fastest names. For most, this was a sideshow attraction, a friendly exhibition amid livestock contests and pie-eating championships. But for Jasmine J. Williams, every fiber of her being pulsed with purpose. Jay stepped onto the rubberized lane with the quiet confidence of someone born to these lanes. She wore navy spikes that hugged her sculpted calves and a fitted tank top bearing her college's crest, Nova State University, the first in her family to earn a scholarship. Her ponytail swung like a pendulum at the back of her head, and beads of perspiration glistened along her brow, evidence of the warm August air and her own anticipation. Around her waist, she carried nothing but a simple drawstring bag, a water bottle, a rolled-up warm-up jacket, and a stopwatch gifted by her high school coach. At the registration table, Sheriff Tom Caldwell presided in full regalia. His star-shaped badge caught the sunlight, glinting against the polished silver of his belt buckle. Mirrored aviators shaded his steely gaze, and the brim of his Stetson cast an angular silhouette over his square jaw. He lounged behind the wooden podium as fairgoers lined up to enter the novelty sprint, a two-lane dash advertised as fun for all ages. When Jay approached, he barely looked up from the stack of entry forms. "Name?" he asked, voice carrying the slow drawl of authority. Jay offered him her registration slip, which listed her time trial best, 10.6 seconds for the 100 meters, a collegiate caliber mark that would have crushed the field at most meets. Caldwell's lip curled into a thin smile as he scanned the paper. "That time's a fantasy, girl," he said, sliding the slip aside. "This is Rosedale County, not the Olympic trials. Best stick to high school meets." A murmur rippled through the small crowd gathered at the fence line. Jay felt the hush press in on her. Children perched on fathers' shoulders, elderly couples on picnic blankets, local farmers leaning on their shovels. She lifted her chin, meeting the sheriff's smirk with steady eyes. "I'm here to race," she replied, voice calm but firm. "I've run in regulation meets all season. I want to register." Caldwell tipped his hat back, revealing eyes that glittered with amusement, and something more unsettling, an unspoken doubt born of prejudice. Over the PA system, the announcer crackled to life. "Next up, our exhibition dash. Sign up here at the sheriff's desk. Promise you won't break anything." Laughter rippled through the stands. Jay's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with resolve. She knew what awaited her on that starting line. A showdown not just against the stopwatch, but against every low expectation stacked against her. As the sheriff reached for the clipboard, Jay squared her shoulders, ready to meet his disbelief head-on. Jay ducked under the canvas flap of the judge's tent and paused, letting the cool shade wash over her like a balm. The midday sun outside was relentless, glare bouncing off the fair's metal bleachers and rippling across the track's white lines. Inside, the air smelled faintly of chalk dust and damp canvas, punctuated by the sweet tang of sports drinks lined up on a folding table. A handful of local runners and wannabe sprinters clustered on plastic chairs, their county-issued singlets clinging to their backs with sweat. At the front, Sheriff Caldwell lounged behind a wooden folding table, his mirrored sunglasses catching the flicker of overhead bulbs and reflecting every hopeful face before him. Jay approached, hand extended with her official time trial slip, an impeccable 10.60 seconds, logged at last weekend's university meet. She met Caldwell's gaze head-on. His eyes, hidden behind reflective lenses, remained unreadable, but she caught the small tightening of his jaw as he accepted the paper. Around them, the crowd fell silent, sensing the unspoken stakes. Jay took a breath, heart pounding, and spoke clearly. "Sheriff Caldwell, I'd like to register for the exhibition 100-meter dash. My best official time is on that sheet." Caldwell flipped the slip over with a slow, deliberate motion and tapped the back of his pen against the table's edge. 10.6, he drawled. voice loud enough for everyone under the tent to hear. He let the question hang in the humid air, then chuckled, the sound brittle, edged with condescension. Girl, that's a pipe dream. This here's a fun run for county folk and their kids. We don't need someone coming in with fancy college times and stealing our thunder. A ripple ran through the onlookers. Jay felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not from the sun, but from indignation. She squared her shoulders, the stiff fabric of her singlet pressing into her skin, and held the sheriff's gaze. Friends she'd brought, teammates from Nova State, shifted uncomfortably at the edges of the tent, clutching clipboards and water jugs. A group of local teens murmured among themselves, eyes wide in sympathetic concern. Jay's throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. Sheriff, with all due respect, I'm here to race. You told me at registration I'd need to prove myself. I'm ready right now. Give me a stopwatch and a lane. Caldwell leaned back, folding his arms beneath the sheriff's star pinned to his chest, and regarded Jay as one might a curious exhibit. He shook his head slowly, as if fighting back amusement. Prove yourself, huh? All right, sweetheart. Let's make this interesting. You say you can run 100 meters in 10.6 seconds? Do it here and now, right on this county track, without the fancy blocks and high-tech surfaces you're used to. He tapped the table. If you break 11 flat, I'll personally announce you as our guest star. But if you fail, his smirk widened. Well, you'll save us all the embarrassment of watching you try. A hush fell over the tent. Jay felt every eye on her, some hopeful, some skeptical, some downright hostile. Her pulse pounded in her ears, each beat echoing the sheriff's challenge. She pictured the track's rubber lanes beyond the tent flap, sun-drenched and waiting. A cool confidence settled in her chest. She knew exactly what she had to do. Meet me at the starting line, she said, voice low and unyielding. At the edge of the tent, noon sharp. With that, she pivoted on the balls of her spikes, brushing past the tent's support pole, and stepped back into the blazing light. No longer an underdog begging for a chance, but a contender ready to claim what was hers. Before the first hint of sunrise, Jasmine J. Williams slipped under the faded entrance arch of the fairgrounds, her navy spikes whispering against damp asphalt. The track lay deserted in the pale pre-dawn light, each rubberized lane slick with dew that shimmered like scattered diamonds. Cool air, scented with cut grass and distant hay bales, filled her lungs and steadied her racing heart. In this hushed hour, the world had narrowed to the curve of the track and the soft rhythm of her breath. Jade dropped her drawstring bag beside the starting blocks and began her ritual. She rolled her shoulders in tight circles, loosening sinews still stiff from yesterday's tension. Each stretch, the lunging calf stretch, the deep hip opener, the winged tease for her deltoids, felt both familiar and sacred. She tugged at the laces of her spikes, then tapped the blocks into place. Back foot firm against the high block's heel plate. Front foot angled for the explosive drive she would need. With each adjustment, she visualized her muscles coiling like springs, ready to uncoil in a single, perfect burst of power. As the sky brightened from ink to pale lavender, Jay jogged a few strides along the outside of lane 1. The muted thump of her footfalls echoed in the stillness, a private metronome counting down to her moment. She flicked open her stopwatch, checking its crisp digits against her mental targets. 30 meters in 3.8 seconds, 60 in 6.4, and the finish under 10:45. A bead of sweat traced a line down her temple, and she wiped it away, sealing her focus on the lane ahead. In that fragile calm, she felt her coach's voice echo in her mind. Trust your training. Own every step. A distant rumble interrupted her thoughts. A lone pickup truck rolling through the fairground gate. Jay turned to see Sheriff Caldwell emerge from the shadows, his silhouette framed against the awakening sky. He strolled toward her, belt buckle and badge glinting, hands hooked at his hips. Without a word, he met her gaze. A silent challenge passed between them. Jay stepped into the blocks, lowering her body into the on-your-marks position, muscles coiled beneath skin. The sheriff's exhale floated across the track. 10:45. His voice carried a mixture of doubt and grudging curiosity. Jay lifted her head, eyes fixed on the lane markers, and whispered, Watch me. Above them, the horizon flared gold, an unspoken starting pistol. At the exact stroke of noon, the sun crested fully over the grandstand rooftop, flooding the track in brilliant light and igniting every drop of dew into a fleeting sparkle. Sheriff Caldwell lifted his pistol starter, a ceremonial relic from decades past, its barrel gleaming brass against the sky. He glanced at Jay, whose crouched form in the blocks looked like coiled steel, muscles rippling beneath her singlet. A hush fell over the few onlookers assembled behind the finish line. Maintenance staff, early vendors, and Jay's solitary coach, all frozen in anticipation. Caldwell brought the pistol to his shoulder and exhaled. On your marks. Jay's fingertips pressed into the starting line, her spine arching into the perfect set position. Get set. Each sinew tensed, every fiber electric. And then, bang! The crack of the starter pistol echoed like thunder, launching Jay forward. Her drive phase was textbook perfection. She exploded from the blocks, torso low, elbows pumping, every powerful stride devouring ground. At 20 meters, she had already shed the acceleration phase and was surging upright, chest forward, legs flicking under her in fluid motion. Caldwell watched the stopwatch in his free hand, thumb poised over the stop button. By 40 meters, Jay's form had settled into a seamless rhythm. Her legs churned at a dizzying cadence, arms driving in precise opposition, eyes fixed on the tape she would pierce. The track's rubber hissed beneath her spikes, each step a heartbeat of raw power. Pamphlets and empty cups fluttered in the breeze, spectators' cast-offs that now seemed to swirl in slow motion as Jay thundered past them. At 60 meters, Caldwell's stopwatch read 6.34 seconds, already under the unofficial county best. A flicker of astonishment crossed his sun-shaded eyes, but his face remained impassive. He tracked Jay's relentless surge. 80 meters flashed under her feet, the final straightaway opening like a runway. In those last 20 meters, every ounce of her training crystallized. A controlled lean, muscles firing in perfect sequence, lungs roaring with each oxygen-starved breath. Then, as Jay's chest crossed the finish line, Caldwell slapped the stopwatch. 10.45 seconds. A new world record benchmark that shattered both the sheriff's challenge and the county's expectations in a single, searing burst. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Only the thrum of Jay's rapid breathing and the distant creak of tent poles in the breeze. Then, the grandstand erupted. A lone vendor dropped his metal tray. Jay's coach pounded the track in triumph. Sheriff Caldwell lowered his pistol, removing his hat in a rare display of respect. He strode forward through the shimmering heat waves, extending his hand. Jay, chest heaving and sweat gleaming like dew on her brow, accepted the handshake with a radiant yet composed smile. In that single race, 4 straight seconds of blistering speed, Jay had rewritten the narrative of doubt into a testament of undeniable excellence. As spectators swarmed to witness the scoreboard's numbers, the sheriff himself raised the PA microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, our county fair has a new hero, Jasmine Williams, record breaker and the fastest woman on any track today. The applause that followed rolled across the fairgrounds like thunder, forever marking the moment when prejudice met its match in sheer, unprecedented speed. Barely minutes had passed since Jay's blistering 100 meters, and the county fairgrounds still hummed with the aftershocks of her first record. Officials scurried to reposition the cones, staggered starting blocks set on the curve, a fresh marker at the halfway turn, and a crisp white finish line tape stretched taut beneath the scoreboard. The late afternoon sun cast long shafts of light across the rubberized lanes, turning each one to molten bronze. Jay stepped into lane 4, her spikes clicking in the hush that fell over the small crowd gathered at the stands. She wore the same navy kit and spikes, now damp with effort, and her ponytail swung low behind her, whipping between her shoulder blades. Sheriff Caldwell stood off to the side, stopwatch in hand, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting Jay's poised form as she bent to her blocks, muscles coiled like springs. On your marks. Jay's fingertips kissed the painted line, her head low, shoulders tense against her ears. Get set. She lifted into the classic curved start position, center of gravity pitched forward, eyes fixed on the track's gentle arc. And then, bang! The starter's pistol cracked, and Jay exploded into motion. Her acceleration around the bend was hypnotic. With each drive out of the blocks, her legs pumped in perfect cadence, propelling her forward along the curve. She leaned into the turn, the centrifugal force cradling her hips as she drove her lead knee high, free leg slicing underneath. Arms carved tight arcs, right elbow pulling past her ribs, left arm launching forward, each swing synchronized with the turn's torque. At the 50-meter mark, Jay had already made up most of the stagger on the runner outside her lane. Wind stirred her singlet's hem, and the track beneath her shoes seemed to pulse with every step. Caldwell's thumb hovered over the stopwatch's lap button as he tracked her split. 10.62 seconds at 100 meters. Already a whisper under the previous world, best for the straightaway alone. Now, on the back straight, Jay straightened her posture, transitioning from curve efficiency to upright velocity. Her breathing came in measured gasps, each inhale a dagger of oxygen driving her heart, each exhale a controlled release of tension. The sun glinted off sweat on her brow as she charged toward the final turn, hips squared, arms driving like pistons. Rounding into the final 50 meters, she leaned forward in perfect form. Every ounce of power she'd summoned in those first explosive strides was now refined into razor-sharp speed. The finish line loomed ahead, a ribbon of white against the bronze track. Sheriff Caldwell clicked the stopwatch as Jay's chest broke the beam. 21.30 seconds. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, the small grandstand erupted. Vendors hurling their trays, early departing families doubling back, Jay's coach barreling onto the infield in triumphant disbelief. Caldwell lowered his sunglasses, his jaw slack with respect. He raised the PA microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Rosedale County Fair witnesses its second world record today. Jasmine J. Williams, 21.30 for the 200 meters. Jay slowed to a jog, arms lifted in a subtle salute, eyes bright with controlled joy. In 2 straight bursts of pure speed, she had rewritten every expectation, not just for the sheriff, but for everyone who thought her ambition a mere fantasy. As the sun dipped low and shadows lengthened across the fairgrounds, the track took on a molten glow, each rubber lane alive with the day's lingering heat. Jay stood at the start of the quarter-mile lane, heart pounding in measured rhythm. She'd already shattered 2 world records today. Now the final test loomed. 1 full lap of unforgiving demand, the 400 meters that separates sprinters from grinders. Sheriff Caldwell watched from the infield, stopwatch in hand and brow furrowed with genuine respect. Track officials reset the cones, placing the staggered start marker in lane 4. A hush fell over the small crowd. Vendors and maintenance crews, fried food cooks leaning on their grills, Jay's coach pacing on the grass, all waiting to see if she could muster the endurance to match her raw speed. Jay slipped on a new pair of spikes, lightweight with deeper grooves for traction, and donned her dark navy singlet. She jogged a slow circle, feeling the tracks give beneath her feet, then came to a screeching stop at the blocks. Her breathing was controlled but fierce, a steady 2 in, 2 out that fueled her muscles without wasting precious oxygen. She crouched into the on your marks pose, muscles coiled like springs. Get set. The stadium lights beneath the pavilion flickered on, as though eager to spotlight this final act. Bang! Jay exploded forward, driving from the blocks into her first 50 meters with the explosive power of a grenade blast. Her arms pumped in perfect opposition, shoulders low, chest thrust forward. By the 100-meter mark, tracked at 11.00 seconds, she had already established a blistering pace that would crush most competitors. Entering the back straight, 200 meters, fatigue whispered at her hamstrings. But Jay responded with iron resolve. She lengthened her stride, maintaining form. Hips square, footfalls light yet forceful. Each breath was a carved inhale of determination, each exhale a purge of doubt. The stopwatch in Caldwell's hand ticked past 22 seconds, a time That would have been a world record alone for that distance. Rounding the final bend at 300 meters, Jay's legs burned as lactic acid flared in her quads. Her coach leaned forward, shouting cadence cues. Drive through the pain! Lean into it. Jay sank her head slightly, vision narrowing to the next 50 meters. She focused on the finish line ribbon twisting in the breeze, just 60 feet away, convincing herself each step would be the final one. In those last meters, time decelerated. Jay's foot hit the track with pistoning regularity, calves on fire, lungs searing with every gulp of air. Her arms swung like hammers, driving her forward when her legs threatened to betray her. The world compressed into bone and breath and the white line she had to cross. Then, a final surge. Jay leaned at her hips, chest breaking the tape as a chorus of astonished gasps erupted from the bleachers. Sheriff Caldwell snapped his stopwatch. 47.45 seconds. A full 0.15 seconds under the previous world best. Silence descended for a heartbeat. Only Jay's ragged breath and the distant squeal of carnival rides. Then, the fairgrounds exploded in cheers, a thunderous roar that shook the empty booths and sent stray papers tumbling across the track. Jay slowed to a dizzying jog, fists clenched in triumphant pain, tears of relief glinting in her eyes. Caldwell approached, removing his hat and extending a hand. His voice cracked as he spoke into the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, Jasmine Williams has just broken her third world record today in 400 meters. 47.45 seconds. Unprecedented. As Jay accepted his handshake, the weight of every doubt she'd faced that afternoon finally lifted, replaced by the electric knowledge that sheer will, honed by discipline, can shatter even the most stubborn barriers. As dusk deepened into a tapestry of pink and indigo, the track at Rosedale County Fairgrounds had become hallowed ground. Jay leaned against the metal railing beside the finish line, towel draped over her shoulders, breathing still ragged from the 400 meters that had rewritten history. The once skeptical crowd now swelled with proud applause. Fair workers, local families, and even carnival vendors who'd abandoned their booths to witness this transformative day. Sheriff Tom Caldwell emerged from the infield, his Stetson in hand and his mirrored sunglasses gone. His uniform bore the soft crease of humility rather than authority. He approached Jay with measured steps, clearing his throat. The murmur of the crowd hushed as he raised his voice, not through the PA but directly, so only Jay and those nearest could hear. Ms. Williams, he began, tone earnest, I judged you wrong. I let doubt and prejudice cloud my duty. He paused, searching her eyes for the grace to follow. Jay met his gaze, shoulders squared, expression calm. He continued, effective immediately, Rosedale County will institute open heats at every fair athletic event. No athlete will be barred by expectation, only by performance. And I'll see to it that our track surface and starting blocks meet the standards you deserve. A ripple of cheers swept through the stands. Jay's coach, a veteran of collegiate meets, clapped Caldwell on the shoulder, nodding approval. Neighbors who had once whispered skepticism now stood, clapping and calling Jay their champion. The sheriff extended his hand and Jay accepted it firmly. Their handshake, captured in hundreds of smartphone photographs, symbolized more than apology. It marked a pledge that prejudice would no longer dictate policy. Caldwell nodded, then turned to address the crowd through the PA mic. Thank you, everyone, for witnessing this day. Jasmine Williams didn't just run races today. She showed us the cost of underestimating people. Let's make sure her feats aren't the exception, but the new standard. As the crowd erupted again, local reporters flooded forward, microphones extended. Jay answered their questions with composed clarity, outlining her hopes for youth clinics and fairground track improvements. Parents in the front row exchanged proud glances, envisioning their own children chasing Jay's legacy rather than her shadow. When the lights over the track flickered on for evening practice lanes, Jay gathered her spikes and jogged one final cool-down lap beneath them, a circle of soft white light guiding her path. She paused at the 100-meter mark, traced the painted line with her finger, and smiled. In those 7 blistering races, from Sheriff Caldwell's booth to the record board, she had transformed doubt into progress, bias into new opportunity. Under the emerging stars, the fairgrounds felt reborn. Jay's footsteps faded into evening calm, but the echoes of her triumph and the sheriff's reformed vow would shape every race run here for years to come.